This channel is supported by Truefire. Truefire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. It was my good buddy Jake's birthday yesterday, and he's been talking a little bit about considering going to some digital gear for live use, and I'm trying to talk him down off that ledge as he's thoroughly an analog boy, but that's what this video is about. So, of course, if you're aware of, you know, semi-pro, pro, even touring gigs, there's like a tendency these days to try and, as much as possible for a lot of gigs, whether we should, as guitarists, be fighting to kind of try and keep an amp on stage, or, you know, the scenario where it's appropriate to have an amp and be kind of sensitive to what's going on so that we don't get immediately fired or lose all of our gigs. Anyway, if you're not aware, like, that is a real thing. There are people out there that are not going to particularly like you using an amp. There's certain gigs where people are expecting you these days to use a Kemper or an Axfex or a Helix or some sort of direct solution, and oftentimes this would come with an in-ear expectation. That's typically the way that it goes. So, like, the normal sort of trajectory is that a band has decided, right, we're going to get rid of our wedges and we're going to go to an in-ear system, and on you get to the point where it's actually like, do we want these amps on stage anymore? I think the trouble for me is that then there's certain gigs where an amp would be totally appropriate or totally useful or totally, like, even the right thing to use for a job, where sometimes I think as guitarists we're being encouraged not to. So, for example, say you're playing in a function band and you've got songs like Teenage Dirtbag in the set, and you've got songs like Footloose, you've got big tunes like Living on a Prayer, these kind of things, like rock tunes like I play in my function band. As someone who does the front of house as well, I really like having a real amp on stage, so that the guitar is not having to compete as much with the vocals, not having to compete as much with the keyboards as well. So that's for me why, as a guy who does like a really bad job of front of house, I like to have this guitar coming from another place so that the keyboard and the vocals are able to sort of shine through the front of house, and the guitar is not just that. I'm going to try and get some video later on today in sound check where I'll turn off the amp on stage and I'll just go out front and film a bit from there, and then I'll do it with the amp on as well, because I'm interested to know how much of a difference it's actually making in the room. I suspect that at the level that a lot of us are playing gigs, that if you took the amp stage volume off altogether, then you probably get like a scenario like I'm quite used to seeing, where if people are using all modelling rigs live with a drummer and they take video from stage or whatever, and, you know, close-ups and all that sort of stuff, where it's really hard, even like during a solo, to really pick out the guitar. And I think actually volume is a big part of how we perceive tone in general. This is my biggest fear, is that, I say biggest fear, it's not my biggest fear, but the thing that I want is that when I'm gigging live and I'm taking a solo, which is not it's like egotistical, but at the same time, if you're playing music which has solos in them, I think the idea is that that part should be big and you should be heard. Do you know what I mean? Like a timid solo, and I grew up timid and shy, and I would have my amp and stuff very quiet. You know, like a timid version of Summer of '69, or a timid version of Dancing on the Ceiling. Like, it's these tunes with these big solo parts, I think deserve to be, like, the guitar for that part where it's supposed to shine should shine. Now, there are a bunch of gigs that I've done where I'm expected to use a modeler, and I'm totally okay with that. And there are some gigs where there are no solo spots, and to be honest, I really don't mind in that case just going fully direct and just not taking an amp. I'll use like an FM9 or a full Helix. They're normally in-ear gigs, and for example, they might be like gigs where you're doing like a lot of soul, Motown, that sort of thing. In that case, like, I'm not gonna bother taking an amp, because it's like I'm part of a band which is not entirely guitar focused, so it's, I think, more about being sensitive to what's happening on the gig. But I think there is a case to be made that any gig you should be able to take an amp, and there's a local guy who plays in a couple of bands. Ollie Harris plays for a function band called Conscious Club, and he also has a band called Big Lava. He's a guy that I've seen some videos where he uses like a Fender Champ, like on his function gigs, and that to me seems like a really clever way to sort of solve some of this stuff. And you think about someone like Chris Stapleton, who is using like small, like brown-faced Princetons, right? Like low wattage amps in massive venues, and I think maybe that's actually, if you're thinking about, I really want to use an amp, maybe thinking that's like possibly the way to go, and being a bit more sensitive. Instead of 100 watt whatever at the edge of breakup, bring the wattage down potentially, so you can get to where that is at a slightly more manageable volume. And even 20 watt tube amps, I find, are actually super loud in general. If you need a really clean amp, then obviously that headroom needs to come up. Like, I was watching Incognito with Charlie Allen playing the other day. He had a Fender Twin on 4.5, which is insane to think about, really, but he's mostly playing very clean, and he had horns behind him. That's a band that still have some wedges and stuff like that. He wasn't loud at all. Like, the stage volume was loud enough that actually that Fender Twin, in some cases, I thought he could have come up in the mix, if anything. So that's kind of a thing, like, context is everything. I would say that, yeah, think about things that you could do to get that amp back on stage if you're wanting to. Like a smaller amp, like a Fender Champ or a Princeton could be a thing. Have you considered maybe, like, imagine this, that you turned your amp to face you, like, what sort of volume would you be playing with then? At the very least, tilting your amp back can be a really good thing, because then you get more an idea of like how you're actually loud you are, and that will encourage you to bring your volume down a little bit, unless it's versus just beaming straight at your legs. But I do think that most gigs can cope with an amp, especially like pub gigs with dodgy PAs and stuff like that, or two guitar gigs. There's lots of them where I think we should be, you know, fairly confident that an amp is the right tool for this job. I think that's someone who's very comfortable using digital stuff, but I think we should fight, in my opinion, to keep amps on amp appropriate gigs. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and are you still gigging a 4x12? If you are, I want to hear from you.